next presenter, Olivia Moon.
Good morning. My name is Olivia Moon, and I will be presenting my thesis on the power of influence, allowing Christ to be our number one influencer. The Great Commission is a term that Christians hold near and dear to their hearts. Simply stated, the Great Commission commands followers of Christ to spread the gospel to all ends of the earth. With the infiltration of social media into the lives of people worldwide, that should make achieving the Great Commission easier than ever before. However, that is not the case. Social media, in reality, is a metaphorical plague that has taken over our world and has negatively engulfed the minds of its users. Does this mean that we should ban social media from the lives of Christians? Possibly, but that is an unlikely suggestion since social media is not inherently sinful. Rather, Christians must consider whether they are influencers on social media or consumers of social media. Jesus would warn believers to be mindful of what the world is selling, as he's already declared, "Watch out and guard yourselves against every form of greed. For not even when one has an overflowing abundance does his life consist of, nor is his life derived from his possessions." Christians must consider whether they are influencers on social media or consumers of social media. If not, then we will inadvertently assimilate into the broken culture where we live today. Pandora's box serves as a warning that Christians must heed in order to combat the effects that social media has on our world. Let's first understand the reason for referencing Pandora's box. Zeus commanded Hephaestus to craft a beautiful woman out of earth and water. Not only was she beautiful, but she was given a special, unique gift by each of the Olympian gods before her inevitable journey to earth. This woman is named Pandora, which means the gift of all, because she was given such powers by each of the gods. Then, one fateful night, after marrying Epimetheus and being given the box of gifts, Pandora, succumbing to her curiosity, peeked inside of the box. But even the little peek was too much. Pandora tried to shut the box, but it was too late. The box flew open, and all of the plagues and sorrows that were once held strictly inside of the box were then released into the world. Sickness, insanity, pestilence, vice, passion, greed, crime, lies, jealousy, and even death. Before inhabiting the world and destroying all humanity, the scourges stung Pandora and Epimetheus, leaving them in extreme pain. Pandora was devastated with the harm that she caused all humanity, but then she looked once again inside of the box, and one little sprite of goodness flew out: hope. Buried deep beneath all of the misery was hope, the only redemptive power to save humanity in times of deep and sincere despair. A myth as old as Pandora's box from 600 BC reveals possible dangers of unbridled curiosity. Social media is the present-day Pandora's box, as it has opened our world to some of the exact same plagues and sorrows that Pandora's box did for her world. However, like the myth, we have a sprite of hope. As Christians, despite the disheartening reality of plagues of social media, we can still strive to use social media as a way that honors God and not as a way of inhabiting the customs of our world. Social media influences all its users, but as Christians, we must be on our guard for how we are allowing it to influence us, and we need to be the influencers of it. Christians, whether we want to accept it or not, are treating social media and technology as an idol in our lives, allowing it to control and influence us to the point that we are hurting ourselves. Sociologists, lawyers, preachers, professors, and therapists all agree that the media is affecting our culture, our children, and our relationships with the Lord. We are so obsessed with ourselves and the perfectly pictured lives of others on social media that we spend countless hours mindlessly scrolling and liking posts. But when was the last time we spent hours reading and studying God's Word? Let's begin by imagining a world that is constantly at war with itself. In the same world, imagine different groups of people, separated based on culture, belief, or location. In this world, imagine a government that is sworn to speak only the truth, yet news and data prove fallacies of what was once proclaimed as the truth. Imagine a world claiming to be bettering generations to come, yet children are being exposed to ideas and concepts that many adults do not even fully grasp. In this world, imagine different religions claiming to be treated equally. However, when a certain religion shares their beliefs, they receive backlash that no other religions receive. If this sounds familiar to you, that is because that is the world we live in today. We live in a world that uses social media platforms as a way of relentlessly pressing certain thoughts and beliefs upon others. We live in a world claiming to tolerate all views. However, our social media platforms are engulfed in hate comments that are being taken out of the screens and onto the streets, where buildings and personal belongings are being destroyed just to show loyalty to a cause. We live in a world where the government is full of secrets and only tells us what they want us to know when they want us to know it. We live in a world where children, no matter the age, have access to social media that has no true filter of the atrocious reality of the happenings of our world. We live in a world claiming to accept all religions. However, if you admit to be a Christian and post on social media about your beliefs, you're immediately shamed, receiving messages that might make you question aspects of your faith. We live in a world so obsessed with influencers, with likes, and with followers that even Christians are losing sight of their one true calling to be disciples of the Lord, sharing His love with others. In the world we live in today, seldom do people have their own thoughts and opinions. This may be from the news, schools, or simply just driving down the road and seeing billboards. Everywhere you turn, you're bombarded with some form of advertisement. It is up to us to be aware of what we are allowing to consume so much of our time. If we continue to spend countless hours mindlessly scrolling through social media, then how are we ever going to have time to grow our relationships with the Lord? In order to keep social media from becoming an idol in our lives, we must make time for the Lord and stop worshiping our phones. Christians may not be physically bowing down to the screens that they have at their fingertips, but I bet their screen times would say otherwise. Technology is front and center in our lives. It's in our pockets and even on our wrists. Do we treat the Bible this way? For most Christians, the answer is no. For most, they allow the world to impact their lives far more than they allow the Bible to influence their lives. We were created for community with people. However, social media should not be our primary form of connection. If we allow social media to dominate our lives, then we're allowing it to have too much control over our thoughts. Paul writes in Philippians, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, with any excellence, with anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you." Christians are encouraged to fix their eyes upon heavenly ideals in order to keep their hearts in line with God. Despite distractions that we may face on earth, we cannot let the world affect our theology. We cannot let our worldview affect our biblical view. In fact, our biblical view should be what influences our worldview. Our love for God should be the source of all of our thoughts, opinions, and actions. Why do we feel like social media should be our primary form of relationship building and maintaining when it was only created a little under 30 years ago? In 1997, Andrew Weinrich founded Six, the first ever social media-like platform. The initial intention for it was for people to be able to connect with their contacts, people they already knew, privately, by creating a profile page and sending messages within the database. Within 3 short years, that company was bought and soon shuttered. Then, in 2003, MySpace was published, a platform where you could create blogs, add movies and photographs, and showcase your skills and interests on a public profile page that was visible to any user of the platform. For almost every year since 2003, a new social media platform with new advancements and new features has been released. With new features comes more and more ways for you to post your life to hundreds of thousands of people who do not know you and who do not need to know every detail of your life. Privacy is something that our society no longer values. However, it is something as Christians we must protect at all costs. After all, knowledge is power, but power in the wrong hands can lead to utter destruction. It can be fun to post on social media, and in no way is posting bad, but posting every detail of your life is simply not safe. Additionally, with posting comes obsessing over the number of likes, followers, and comments you have, which likely turns into mindlessly scrolling through your feed while you wait for your post to gain more attention. Social media has proven itself to be an addiction like any other addiction. The only way to free yourself from the trap of social media is to be aware of the addictive nature of it. Social media, unlike other addictions, is indefinitely and automatically refilling itself, never giving its users a chance to stop. The infinite nature of social media causes it to be one of the most challenging addictions to break. With substance addictions, its users run out at some point, even if that just be temporarily. That causes the users to have a break from their addiction and makes it the slightest bit easier for them to get a hold of their addiction. According to Dr. Nancy DeAngelis, CRNP and Director of Behavioral Health at Jefferson Health, says, social media platforms drive surges of dopamine to the brain, causing the consumers to come back over and over again. The shares, likes, and comments on these platforms trigger the brain's reward center, resulting in a high similar to one people get when gambling or using drugs. Social media is just another addiction that our society has fallen victim to, and it is an addiction that can be broken, but only if the user is truly willing to put in the time it takes to free themselves from it. The world has been completely engulfed in social media since it was created, and very few people have taken the time to realize and consider the possible long-term effects it may have on its users. We claim to be building better generations to come, but in reality, is that what's happening? Or are we as a society putting all of our faith and support into a new creation that may and currently is causing far more harm than it is good? As Christians, why have we allowed ourselves to fall into the trap of social media along with the rest of the world? Why have we allowed social media to take over our lives, allowed it to control us? Our society pushes and showcases the wonderful advancements that social media brings to our world. However, there are many downsides that we must be taking into consideration if we're going to continue to allow ourselves to spend so much time on it daily. The minds behind social media have created a new disguised evil that consumes the minds of those who use it. They've created a new drug, a new alcohol, a new addiction that so many of us have allowed to take over our lives. We idolize social media without even realizing it, but that is not the first time that our society has dismissed all potential negative effects that a new creation may have down the road. Take cigarettes, for example. In the 1900s, smoking cigarettes was popular and quite commonplace. During that time, advertisements were posted encouraging people to buy and smoke cigarettes. The advertisements even included doctors smoking and a quote from them speaking about the benefits of cigarettes. Then, in the 1960s, news broke of the profound amount of data proving that smoking cigarettes led to lung cancer and ultimately death. A habit that was once wholeheartedly supported by medical professionals and other well-educated individuals ultimately led to great confusion, sickness, and disease. Should we not be the slightest bit concerned that social media could be causing the same negative consequences to us now? Since its origins, social media has captivated our world, and we have dismissed the idea of long-term effects it may have on its users. However, Mary Hepburn, an academic researcher at the University of Georgia and author of the article, "The Power of the Electronic Media and the Socialization of Young Americans," quotes Harvard scholar Kiko Adato in her article and states, "Years of electronic news consumption, received in quick, brief segments and sound bites of speech, have produced a shorter attention span for news and less understanding of public affairs, especially for those who have little background knowledge. The way we are consuming media is destroying our attention spans." According to the National Library of Medicine, Stephanie Olson states, "Media multitasking has been linked to worse attentional control, greater distractibility, as well as attention lapses, which results in a number of learning and behavioral disabilities in our young children." Over the course of years since social media's origins, the number of cases of children being diagnosed with ADHD, dyslexia, as well as other learning disabilities has distinctly increased due to the overconsumption of media and screens. Technology has caused more and more learning, behavioral, and comprehension challenges for our students. A low attention span creates less patience. Less patience creates frequent arguments and disagreements. Frequent arguments and disagreements creates division, and division is not the plan God has for us. Justin Earley writes in his book, Made for People, "Technology will either push us further into friendship or drive us into dangerous loneliness." Is technology really worth this possibility? Technology has allowed many people to form connections, to communicate with others across the world, and to gain an immense amount of knowledge. However, connections are not friendships, communication with random people is not intimacy, and a worldly knowledge is not wisdom. In many cases, social media can lead to tribalism through the isolation that is formed from crafted algorithms and personalized news feeds that amplify a person's already established opinion and connect them to other like-minded individuals. Social media is one of the largest inhibitors of the division found in our world today. As a society, we claim to be building better, stronger relationships by forming connections with like-minded people, but what about the people that disagree with what we believe in? How are we treating them? How are we making them feel like they are loved, included, and made with the purpose? Are we allowing these cliques to form a greater divide rather than mend the division? As Christians, have we lost sight of the Bible, or have we allowed the views of the world to overcome our views of the Bible? We were all created with different talents and different interests, but it was God's intention that in our differences we would find unity through Him. There is a bond of peace that comes with the relationship with God, and peace ultimately is what unifies all nations. As Christians, we should strive to use our social media platforms as a way of proclaiming peace and building unity through the nations, rather than allowing ourselves to become a part of the divide taking over our world today. Every time someone opens social media, he or she is not simply keeping in touch with friends and family. Most of the time, they're getting sucked into pointless drama going on in politics, the lives of famous actors or actresses, as well as other agenda-pushing content. A prime example of what happens when we care too much about or mind other people's business is in The Crucible. In The Crucible by Arthur Miller, innocent people were hanged in the town square because personal agendas and selfish cravings outweighed the lives of the innocent townspeople. Mass hysteria that was rooted in fear and suspicion plagued the towns of Salem, Massachusetts, much like how social media plagues our towns. We hear and even believe rumors that are backed by no true evidence that in turn lead to destruction of reputations, lives, and relationships, much like the destruction found during the Salem witch trials. As Miller believed, minding other people's business was time-honored among the people of Salem, and it undoubtedly created many of the suspicions which were to feed the coming madness. Social media has fast-tracked this time-honored tradition, and it is no secret that the drama and madness has spun out of control in present-day society. People care so much about their image and how others view them that they are willing to accuse whomever without evidence in order to make themselves look better. Getting rid of social media altogether is not necessarily the answer. However, moderation, the avoidance of excess, is key when looking at the usage of social media in our lives. Christians, especially those who are involved in social media, should be aware of how social media can and is affecting them. It is important to set limits for yourselves so that you're not allowing social media to become your number one influencer and priority over God. Some Christians may argue that without having a Christian influence on social media, that we, as the body of Christ, are wasting a wonderful platform to share the gospel. After all, isn't that what the Bible calls us to do? Acts 14:37 commands believers to be a light so that Christians may spread the gospel to all ends of the earth. However, if that thought drives Christians to mindlessly scroll through social media, unconsciously being influenced by worldly biases, then Acts 14:37 is not being fulfilled. Instead, Christians are becoming just as easily influenced as non-Christians, and now no one is fully equipped with the armor of God in order to share the gospel. Truth be told, there comes a point when one's own walk with the Lord must be prioritized in order to effectively share the gospel. Think about it this way. When flight attendants give instructions for emergency procedures, they tell adults to secure their own oxygen mask before the oxygen mask of a minor. In the case of sharing the gospel, Christians must secure their own oxygen mask before they can share it with others. Is social media providing the security? No. It is inhibiting Christians by providing distractions from reading the Bible and spending time in prayer. On average, a social media user spends 2 hours and 19 minutes a day on social media. That is 2 hours and 19 minutes of clicking, swiping, and scrolling. A true waste of time you can never get back. Think about it this way. 2 hours and 19 minutes a day is equal to 15 hours a week, which is equal to 780 hours or close to 32 days a year. Christians claim to be using their social media platforms as a way of sharing the gospel, but is that what you're doing for 2 hours and 19 minutes of your day? In 1972, 90% of Americans claimed to be Christians and attended church. By 2020, that number dropped to 64% of Americans, and it is projected that by 2070, that number could drop to an all-time low of 35%. If Christians truly are sharing the gospel on social media, then wouldn't the number of Americans professing Christianity and attending church have gone up over these years? The reality of the availability of social media is that it causes more and more distractions for Christians in their walks with the Lord. People often use social media as a way to stay up to date with friends and family. However, social media has only been around for roughly 30 years. How do you think people survived before the creation of it? Long before social media, people were able to communicate with others and were knowledgeable about things going on in the world. We live in a world that demands instant gratification and lacks patience, which often leads to our society dismissing potential dangers just to be temporarily satisfied. Why do we put so much trust and support into numerous platforms that are full of blasphemous ideas and concepts that are not really true at all? In Ephesians 4:29, we are called to let no corrupting words come out of our mouths. We are to speak in a way that is good for building up and gives grace to those who hear. Much of what social media produces and supports is the exact opposite of what Ephesians 4:29 calls us to do. As Christians, creating boundaries between us and things of this world only helps us better defend ourselves from acting on temptations. 2 millennia ago, Socrates warned the ancient Athenians of their dangers of their busy lifestyles and said, "Beware the bareness of a busy life." The Athenians were known for their busy lifestyles full of social gatherings, debates, and public events, where they were often consumed with the pursuit of power, wealth, and pleasure, often neglecting their purpose for life. Similar to the Athenians, many Americans are caught up in this exact same lifestyle that the Athenians were. Socrates believed that the secret of happiness is not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less. Proclaiming the gospel is one of the most important commandments God has given his people, but social media has created one of the largest diversions from this very commandment. It can easily become either our greatest tool or our greatest distraction. Which will you allow it to be in your own life? How much control will you allow it to have over you? Do not be influenced, be the influencer. Thank you. I would now like to open the floor for any questions.
Based on your research, give us an executive summary of how someone would break the addiction. What are the steps that a person who can't stay off of social media can take to make that break?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't do a whole lot of research on ways of how to do that, but some practical aspects that I took throughout my time doing this paper was really just being intentional with your time. And it can be very easy. We're all prone to just open our phones and get on a social media platform. But while I did all of this research that I've done, for me personally, it really took making myself to not open it. It's a very conscious decision you have to make to choose to do something else with your time, and that's just something that you have to be dependent on yourself to do, and you can't expect others to do that for you.
Thank you.
Olivia, based on what you've shared with us today, how could we use social media to accomplish the Great Commission?
That's a great question. I think for me personally, and this is ways that I've done it, is I just enjoy sharing my faith on social media, and I enjoy sharing with others how God's working in my life and the things that He's done. But one of the main parts of my paper is that doing that is the step of sharing the gospel, but then when you turn that into countlessly just spending hours just scrolling on social media, that's when it becomes harmful. And so there's nothing wrong with sharing the gospel on social media by any means, but when it turns into an addiction where you're constantly just on social media, that's when it's an issue, and that's when the gospel is not really being shared.
Since social media tends to foster less real and sincere connections between people, do you think sharing the gospel on social media would be as effective as, to spend your time on as compared to sharing it in person? Because it's shown that when you're more connected to someone or more close to someone, sharing the gospel is far more effective that way.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think that social media should be our primary form of sharing the gospel, but it is a really great source that we have to connect to others that live in different countries or different states. But like you said, it is very aware, we're all aware that sharing the gospel in a very personal way is much more effective than through a screen.
So how has it really affected you doing your research paper? Have you seen a change in what you do with your time each day?
Yeah, I think for me, I've really taken a lot of what I've researched, and I've taken it to heart in the sense of before I did this, I was very addicted to social media. That was a constant for me, and not saying that I completely just removed myself from it, but I definitely, when my brain would be oh, let me open Instagram or let me go do this and that, I made the conscious decision of, no, there's something much better I could be doing with my time, and making that choice really does change the way that you see fruits in your life.
So this is obviously an ongoing issue, especially in your age group. Do y'all talk about this, specifically what you mentioned in the negative form? Is this discussed? Do y'all talk about how to correct it? What is the sort of the narrative that goes on in your age group about this?
I think we would all be lying to ourselves if we said that we didn't see the negatives that social media does have. And I honestly think that among the younger generations, it should be talked about more, because I don't think that we do talk about it as much as we should. I think a lot of it is older generations telling us, oh, you need to get off of social media, but that doesn't really do much for younger generations. And so I feel like if our generation did talk about it more, there could be a lot more changes that do happen.
Are time limits often put on yourselves? Do y'all do that quite often, or is it not something that is commonly done within the phone?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of times parents take a lot of that responsibility and they do that, but going into college and where you get to make your own choices, and when that's now my choice of how much time I spend on it, I know for me, I do set a limit for myself, but I can't speak for everyone, but that's just how I handle social media. Yeah.
So when you're talking about social media, you're kind of grouping them all together. I know there's different types of social media. Is there a specific social media or social medias you would recommend, maybe one over the other? And then on top of that, another question I would have is, with a kid, when would you say is a mature age that you feel like it's okay for them to handle that, having social media?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I don't really know if there's a social media I would say that is better than others, because there can be faults to every single social media. Just because there's so many different things, there's so much comparison that can happen, there's so much judgment that can happen on any platform. But with your other question, I know for me personally, like I was able to have Instagram like when I was 13, and that was a step for me. That was like a lot of seeing the world, and you were open to a lot of different ideas. But like I wasn't allowed to have Snapchat until I was 18, because that's an entirely different just like realm of things that happen on there. And so I think definitely preserving childhood innocence is really important when it comes to social media, because there's a lot that can happen when you're exposed to all of that. Okay, if there are no further questions, thank you.